Today, I would like to talk about all of the projects which I've been building over the past 6 weeks since I became unemployed. So, getting started, this Agentic Project Tracker app, which I use as kind of a holistic view of all the projects I'm building, is a app which I am currently working on, and it is this agentic project tracker. And effectively, what it is used for is to monitor the state of all of the projects which I'm building and be able to create tasks to delegate to an agent and then allow them to run concurrently on each of these projects and build out functionality as I see fit. And yeah, the utility this app has provided me has been a really big boost in productivity, and it's been a net positive for me. And it's something that I started building, I think, when they dropped Fable 5 maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I kind of used this project as the catalyst to experiment with Fable 5's capability. And giving a bit of a demonstration here, I've done previous videos, but we can see every week I'm making small improvements to this app as I see like missing utility or little nice to haves or quality of life features I'd like to integrate. So we can see here when I look at my Agentic Project Tracker project, I've got a bunch of different tabs that provide utility. So like I can take a look at what skills this project uses or is impacted by. I can see a bunch of analytics which are tied to GitHub and releases, like older releases, so I can take a look at maybe improvements to this app as I deploy new features. I can see the current release in development. I've got pipelines, so I can view like the CI/CD pipelines that are currently active. This is currently configured for just GitHub at the moment, but I believe there is also some kind of Vercel integration in the works with agent tasks that I've kind of got looping at the moment. One new functionality which I added recently is the ability to crack open terminals in the actual app, so I can then have multiple Claude instances running in the actual app itself. And then if I toggle between projects, I don't really need my own terminal like WesTerm anymore. I can just kind of run them in the actual app itself, which is pretty cool. There are some performance or visual glitches still that I'm working through, but it is just a nice to have this kind of utility here. Then alongside that, I have capability to see all of my agent sessions, capability to view the current git diff based on my branch which I'm on versus the branch which is being targeted. So this is particularly helpful when an agent is off doing things. I can actively monitor like the changes that are being made, and then the actual main portion or the biggest benefit of this app is being able to create new tasks. So I can basically just create a task to do something on this particular project. Like if I want to move a label or add capability, I would create a task for it. I can then configure how the task should be executed, whether or not I need to be the human in the loop accepting edits. So it goes to my inbox, which default model to use, the step budget and recovery budget, which is kind of like a fail-safe system so the agent doesn't just run in perpetuity and burn through a bunch of credits. It will kind of accumulate uh, as it works on a task and runs into issues or iterates things. These figures will go up, and once it hits that threshold, it basically requires human in the loop input to continue working, and then also auto approve capability to just allow it to work with my looping and agent task capability. So this actual program has agentic loop feature embedded in it. So if I have looping turned on for a project, the agent will go ahead and pick up any other tasks remaining on the board. And if I turn on agent tasks, the agent will actually, using the current skill configuration, be able to create new tasks while it works. So this is for things like maybe adding end-to-end tests or fixing defects, etc. So yeah, that's the first project that I've been building over the past 6 weeks. Well, this one in particular, 2 weeks, I think. Moving on. So another piece of functionality or another project I've been working on has been this resume website, which I will actually take a look at here. We can see the resume website, which I've built. And as you can see, this is kind of like a custom implementation. And what I wanted was to give it a bit of personality and flair to reflect my background in the games industry and also my current expertise in full stack. So I'm actually using Three.js to render a bunch of 3D scenes in this environment. on the web page itself, and I used AI to generate this model of myself. It's not perfect, but I've got plans, or I've got some things in the works to give this a bit of life. So one of my friends is actually going to do a proper animation and make it blink and maybe give it some character and fix a little bit of the proportions to make it look a little bit more like myself. And as we can see, I can kind of scroll through this single page application and we can see my skills, where I've worked, etc., things I've built. So this is kind of like a portfolio cataloging all the different things that I've been working on. And as we continue scrolling through, this is actually my develop branch, so you won't be able to see this if you go to the live website. But I also wanted to add a little section on like the device I build on, so the device I'm currently using and like my specs. And like if I was to click one of these, for instance, it takes me to the Amazon website. The books I read, or the books that have had the biggest impact on myself. So again, using Three.js scenes to render out like a 3D environment where I can click this and be taken to like the place to purchase it as well, and then just a nice little contact me section. So it's fairly scrollable and light, or not lightweight, because it's got a few 3D renders in this website. But yeah, I've kind of been tinkering and playing around with some of the layouts and styling to be a good reflection, I guess, of my own experience and my character. So yeah, that's my project, or not my project tracker. That's my portfolio website that I've been building. So moving on to the next project in this dashboard that I've been working on over the last 6 weeks has been something which I call the discipline tracker. Now, this is something that has only seen internal use as of this far. It is actually available on a hosted Vercel domain. It's not like a custom domain or anything, but basically what this app is, and it was kind of my idea to try to have some kind of structure in my life now that I'm unemployed. I wanted to make sure I'm still persistent with keeping up with daily routines which will benefit me in the long run, things like studying, drinking water, making sure I'm doing exercise, etc., and keeping up with the job market. So this is just a glorified maybe to-do list, but some of the cool capability in this app that I actually built out was things like stat tracking. So like users can customize these kind of dashboards to see like what kind of streaks they've been on with the habits that they've been trying to form, perfect days where they've completed all of the habits in a particular day, etc. And yeah, I probably haven't been using it as much as I should. It was intended to be part of my daily routine, but I kind of use it more in regard to the actual flashcard capability. So I built this internal feature which allows me to basically answer questions that have been seeded by certain criteria that I got an agent to generate for me and throw into a database. And then every day I basically have these questions which I respond to or like answer, and it's testing me for unknown unknowns. So like it's particular information that could be incredibly diverse across a broad spectrum of skills that I'm expected to know as a senior engineer. And then I just go through and like answer the questions. If I don't know something, it gives me incentive to then read up on it or like try to learn it and reinforce like learning new information every day. So this part of the application was just like a small idea I had to reinforce like good habitual learning and like continued development of my skills as a software engineer. And I was using this pretty much daily for a week or two. And then what I decided was I actually think the premise of like learning unknowns or focusing on like, let's say you configure yourself as wanting to be a senior software engineer in full stack. You can then have questions custom generated for you within that kind of ecosystem of skills that you would need to be effective in that role, right? So this idea I decided to expand on and actually build the next application, which I'm currently developing as well, which I call the Agentic Study Platform. So again, using Vercel to do my deployments and managements there. So this is, I think, technically accessible to the public using the Vercel domains, and it's published with like a V like a kind of like an alpha release here. I don't think I've released my 1.0 yet for this one. But basically, the premise of this app again is you create an account, you in your settings configure your goal, right? So your profile. So you want to pick, let's say, I want to be a deployment engineer with a lead level experience, and these are some extra skills that I want to focus on enhancing. And that's all you need to do to like set up your account. And then when you go to study every day, it'll basically have this pool of questions which are generated, and you would be incentivized to link your actual like AI provider. So in this case, I believe I only have Claude support on the app currently, but you would be incentivized to link your account. And the benefit of doing that is it can then generate a bunch of questions so that it can throw random questions your way based on like the skills and role that you're trying to become proficient in. So in this case, I'm up to like question 9 out of 10 for the specific roles which I have configured for my profile. And by submitting the answer, if I get something wrong, let's see. So incorrect, and it now actually generates like a brief summary of why it was correct and an explanation. And all of this gets generated by AI. And the cool thing about this implementation is because the more users using it, the more questions get generated in the pool. The pool is actually like shared. So you don't necessarily need to connect your account, because if there's 100 users on this app, right, and some of them have, and some developers have gone through like the full stack engineering tree at a lead level of proficiency, there'll be a bunch of questions that were generated that sit in that pool already. So by just like signing up and selecting your skills, it'll then be able to give you a bunch of information. But then the cool thing is, like, if you don't know something, you can then open further reading and it will basically just be generated by AI, like all of this information that you're missing out on, which is, I guess, the premise of the app. The whole thing that I'm trying to build here is like learning unknown unknowns, which I believe competitor apps, like, let's say, what's a good example? Boot.dev, I think, is a good example of like a platform where you go to learn full stack or back end engineering, or W3 Schools is another one where they just have like a platform of a bunch of different programming skills that you can learn. A lot of those platforms, you kind of select a role or a path and you learn the fundamentals, but there's a lot of like niche parts of a skill set that you might never learn, that you would typically only pick up by getting like veteran years of experience in the game. But like getting a career and getting a job and then working on product, there's like a lot of little niche circumstances that don't really come up in those learning paths from those platforms. So that's kind of the goal of this application, is to fill that gap. And I believe by like doing randomized questions that are seeded from like a group of interests and skills that you are actually like genuinely trying to improve at, that's like a good way to learn those unknowns if it's just part of your daily routine. Now, the actual user experience of this app is kind of clunky and bad, right? Like, it looks really unintuitive. That's something I'm probably going to work towards improving, but I'm still figuring out what parts of this functionally will be valuable for me as a developer, and then I'll probably expand it out and like keep working on it. And the long-term goal is like maybe a month from now, the UX will actually be at a point where I'd feel comfortable like releasing it to get maybe some people testing and using the app a little bit more, and maybe integrating it into their own like daily routine. But yeah, this is something I'm hoping to continue using as a developer, regardless of like whether or not I'm employed or unemployed, to be honest. And finally, I think that covers. Yeah. So my agentic workspace. So this is something that I've been building pretty much. I mean, even this kind of predates my 6 weeks of unemployed development, but my agentic workspace is it's just a repository where it kind of houses all of my setup scripts and allows me to get up and running with the environment that I like to work in, on any PC, any Windows or Linux PC. pretty much straight away, right? Like I run a setup script that just installs all my dependencies, configures all my skills, and gets an environment up and running where I can just start working using like agentic workflows out of the box. And yeah, I would, to be honest, recommend any engineer to kind of configure their own workspace the way they like to work with the kind of tools they like to have bootstrapped into their workspace, because it is different for everybody. Like I used to be a little bit of an NVim advocate, and that's part of this like bootstrapper script. It'll install NeoVim with my configurations, and other examples are like my specific skills that I've got here that are global skills. It'll just install them into the specific locations and symlink them, so I don't really need to worry about much. And it's just a general purpose repository that's good for me, because then I know, like, let's say my computer dies tomorrow, it blows up, whatever. That's an extreme example, but I can just crack open my laptop, run this setup script from the repo root, and then have everything up and running and ready to go. So this is something I just kind of contribute to every now and then as my workflow changes and adapts. And that is pretty much everything. Recently, I've started dabbling again with LeetCode, so I store my LeetCode answers in a repo in this project dashboard. And there's a few like miscellaneous things I've been working on behind the scenes, but outside of that, that's pretty much most of the workload I've been building and projects that I'm currently working towards developing. Probably the one I'm most excited about, to be honest, is this Agentic Project Tracker. I feel like this is a program that could provide a decent amount of value to like other users potentially, and people that are less fluent in traditional terminal workflows and IDEs, like people that are maybe less tech native would enjoy these kind of GUI dashboards a lot more. But people that still need to have that level of oversight of like releases of a project or monitor pipelines for like CI/CD constraints and the like, that's kind of the use case for this tool. But it's very much customized to like my workflow and how I like to visualize things. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.